Amanda Olson, and I am going to be talking a little bit this week about what I learned through podcasting, how it relates to the standards for students using technology, how it can implement it into my classroom, and things like that. First of all, I have used the program Audacity to record this podcast. It's something that I've used for recording music in the past, so it was a program that I knew how to use, and I know how to convert the files then into an MP3 format from there. I think that podcasting is a great way for students to meet these ISTE technology standards. I'm going to go through each of them here. So, empowered learner. Students can use this podcast to communicate what they've learned. It might encourage them to further research or read more books if they know that when they get to the end of a book, they can make a podcast about what they've read, like a book review. They might be more encouraged and motivated to do outside research if they know that they have the option to create a podcast on it. So it just kind of encourages and makes learning fun and makes that publishing or communication part of the learning fun and new. Digital citizen is standard number 2. Students are being digital citizens by thinking through what they're saying on their podcast, making sure that they're being respectful, and also knowing that there are responsibilities and rights of using the digital world and that they're using that responsibly. So this is a great way at the beginning of the year to talk about what things are good to talk about in a podcast, what things should you stay away from, what are the things to think about your audience, think about the fact that once it's out there, it's permanently out there on the internet. So, knowledge constructor is number 3, where students are creating a variety of resources using digital tools to construct knowledge, produce creative artifacts, make meaningful learning experiences. These are all things you can do in a podcast. Students are being creative. They're using technological tools. They're making a meaningful learning experience by talking through what they've learned and sharing that with others. Innovative designer. There's not a lot of aesthetic design that goes into a podcast. It's mostly designing how you're going to get your information out to your audience. So they have to design and figure out a way that they can convey what they're trying to say. And I'm going to even connect that with number 6, which is creative communicator. I feel like in podcasting, innovative designer and creative communicator go together in that way, where they're designing how they're going to communicate. As you may have heard at the beginning of my podcast, I even kind of took it a step further by maybe we can incorporate music through having kind of your own theme that plays at the beginning of your podcast. Or something like that. Students could use GarageBand, or I'm hoping to have some instruments in my room that students could use for creating something like that, recording it, and having that play at the beginning of each of their podcasts, kind of like a theme song. Computational thinker. Students are solving problems and employing strategies for understanding those problems. So this isn't necessarily a computational thing with podcasting, but students can understand and solve maybe social problems through a podcast, or talk about several solutions for social problems. You could use this for math. You could use it for math, where students are creating a podcast. Maybe the higher level students who are really excelling at a certain skill might create a podcast that students can click on and listen to at home to help explain the math problems or the math concept to them. And then 7, global collaborator. By creating a podcast, students are becoming part of a global conversation, especially if this was a public podcast, which I'm guessing in most cases I would use this privately within our classroom. However, maybe certain topics we would, with parent permission, publish maybe on iTunes or something like that. I read an article a little bit more about podcasting before doing this, and one classroom actually has their podcast on iTunes where anyone can download and listen to it. So depending on the content, I might even do something like that, and then students do become part of that global conversation. They can reach anyone, anywhere with their words. So that's how it ties into those standards, and I've also talked about some uses in the classroom, book reports, maybe math concepts, but I guess not even limited to math. It could be any concepts for science, social studies, etc., engineering, things like that. We can incorporate music through the theme song, motivate students to do extra learning if this is an option for them after they've done their research, that they can then use a podcast to communicate what they've learned. Overall, I think this is a great tool for students to use in the classroom, and teachers should definitely utilize this. It gives students a voice, and I think also it's an alternative, but shouldn't be a substitute for public speaking. Students learning how to put their words, formulate their thoughts into words for an audience. Maybe this is your first step, getting them used to talking to a microphone, and then taking it the step further. Now let's share it with the class in person too. So it can be a scaffold that way as well. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my experience with podcasting, and maybe it's given you some ideas for what you can use. Definitely, if you have some other ideas or even examples of how you've used podcasting in your classroom, please comment below. Thank you.